What's going on, everybody? My name is Chimpact, and today we are back with the power rankings. This is week 2, and a lot of these power rankings, a lot of the placements for these power rankings, I feel like they're so close together, up until you get up to the top 4, top 3, where I feel like they really differentiate themselves because it's only week 2. There's only so many variations of teams, like strengths that you can go to, because there's 2-0 teams, there's 1-1 teams, and you can't put a 1-1 team at the top because they already lost. You can't put a 2-0 team near the bottom because they're 2-0. Like I can't really tell which teams are gonna just break off and just show that they're better than the others, with only 2 weeks. So all these teams are just very, very close, except for the teams at the top, in my opinion. So we're gonna start with number 10 and number 9 at the same time because they played each other. Number 10 Patty, number 9 Aaron. Um, So yeah, I feel like this was a very, very good game, and ultimately very well played by Aaron near the end game. But he did have a slight hiccup because of the way that he played his Kartana, and I feel like actually both players made a couple misplays near the end game. So Aaron had a good game plan of setting up a Kartana sweep by getting a sneaky KO on the Incineroar with the Mamoswine. I was gonna say Piloswine, but Joey has a Piloswine. He went for the Z Earthquake, the Tectonic Rage against the Incineroar. Patty thought that he was going to be able to live it with the Incineroar thanks to the Intimidate, but he was only going to be able to live an Earthquake and not a Tectonic Rage. I guess you could also say that, like, if it was like banded Mamoswine, I don't remember if he revealed other moves on it or not, like he was able to switch, but I'm pretty sure he did switch up moves, or he knew that it was banded, knew it was not banded. But yeah, that was a sneaky KO, and then later on he was able to knock off the Golbat, or earlier on the Cortana, by knocking off the Golbat early on. The Smart Strike was going to be enough to knock it out later on in the game, and that was just very good, setting up the Cortana to sweep. But unfortunately, he played a little too recklessly with the Cortana. I feel like he should have just played it safer because it was pretty much just a guaranteed win if you got off a little bit more damage off on the Landorus, or if the Cortana got an extra beast boost. I mean, he did get a beast boost with the Cortana going for Smart Strike on the Golbat, but the Intimidate made it go back to neutral. I feel like if you played it more patiently, the Cortana was going to sweep. It was just eventually, it was inevitable for the Cortana to sweep. And I don't know. I feel like you could have played it more patiently and not had to risk late game that happened. So Patty's end game was shaky because he had a Primate and a Druddigon, but went Primate first to click Stone Edge. If you're gonna go Primate first, you have to click Close Combat first. Like, there's no reason to click Stone Edge. Otherwise, you always go Druddigon first. The reason why you go Druddigon first is because you save yourself Primate's 6%, and you're not forced to click Stone Edge or Close Combat with Primate. If you go Druddigon first, not only does Druddigon Naba KO a majority of the time, because Dracometer, it can kill the Guzzlord. You don't know which Pokemon is faster, but it's likely the Druddigon is going to be faster, because I don't think he's really going to invest too much into speed on his Guzzlord. And like, by going Primate first, you're just forfeiting your Druddigon, and at that point you're really only playing for differential. And if that was his mindset, I feel like it's way too earlier in the season to be playing for differential, because you only really want to play for differential when it's going to make or break your season, and when the game is still ongoing, I feel like you only go for differential when you pretty much seal the game away and you can be able to afford it. So yeah, ultimately, not going Druddigon first cost him the game. He made it into having to hit multiple Stone Edges and being able to live the Ice Shard, whereas if you just went Druddigon first, all he needed to do was hit the Draco Meteor and live the roll afterwards, from the Ice Shard. But ultimately, it was a very good game, well played on both sides, and I just feel like both players should have been a little bit more patient. And number 8, Pokemon. He played this game very well. I really like the Choice Scarf Salamence set with HP Flying. It was very well thought out. Ultimately, it was very back and forth. Pokemon got some kills. Drew got some kills. Drew's team, I felt like he didn't really bring the strongest team that he could have brought. He missed out on a couple Pokemon. I really like the fact that the Scarf Lottie came through, but Drew played very, very recklessly throughout the game, and I feel like that kind of cost him in the end, because Pokemon I really like the way that he like kept his composure, because he really thought that he lost in the game, especially when the Empoleon was going for the sweep. But luckily for him, Scarf Salamence was able to outspeed because the Empoleon was not a plus speed nature, I believe, and it was able to go for the Thunderfang on the Empoleon. But it was basically just he kept going for Seed Bomb when he could have went for a Will-O-Wisp or a different attack to prevent the Salamence from coming in and being able to secure either a KO or a lot of damage. And if you just kept using Will-O-Wisp, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. I just don't know. I feel like Mr. Talent literally only needed to preserve his Pokemon to ensure the win, because Nihilego was going to be able to live any hit and Buzzwole was going to be able to live any one hit. But he decided to let both of them take damage, and that was literally the only way that he would have been able to lose. I found the Nihilego set interesting because it was dual screens, and I feel like he just saved the Nihilego at the end, because I was watching it from Pokemon side, and I thought that it was just going to be a Scarf set or something like that because of the way that he was playing with it. But it was dual screen, so if it's a dual screen Nihilego, there's no reason not to bring it out earlier, because it's not really going to be doing much later on in the game. There's very little use for a dual screen Nihilego if you don't bring it early, because those screens lose more and more value the later on the game goes, and Nihilego doesn't have great damage output, obviously, if it doesn't have a boosting item or a scarf or anything like that. So ultimately, I feel like I like the way that, like I said earlier, Pokemon just kept his composure. He knew that there was an opportunity for him to win the game with the Salamence when he hit the Nihilego with the Dragon Claw, and he brought in it safely on the Seed Bomb. So yeah, Pokemon number 8, solid game. And moving on to number 7, I have Leo. Leo was number 5 last week, and he's dropped a little here, and I'll explain why I put him lower this week later on in this Power Rankings episode thing. So he was in control for the majority of the game. It was even all throughout the game, but I feel like Leo just had everything planned out. He put pressure on Kyle with the combination of Lopunny and Manaphy, and I really like the prep that he had with the Lopunny. He put Toxic on it, and Lopunny with Toxic does so much damage to his team, because Lopunny does just the right amount of chip damage to the Nidoqueen where it's not going to really put a lot of pressure on the Lopunny. You can just switch out against the Nidoqueen, and just every little bit of damage against the Nidoqueen is going to be important for Kyle, because for Leo, because he has Toxic on multiple Pokemon, and Nidoqueen is one of the Pokemon that you can't really Toxic, obviously. So being able to weaken that and give yourself more opportunities to click Toxic against Pokemon that aren't Nidoqueen is going to be very important, because Leo did have Toxic on multiple Pokemon. Even during the times where Leo was in a questionable position, he had answers. When the Reuniclus got swapped, he had the Muck in the back, and when the Muck got paired, he didn't really need it at that point. It did its job. Ultimately, the combination of the combination of Toxic on multiple Pokemon and his great pivots. He had Muck, he had Manaphy was also a decent pivot. It had he was able to do a lot of damage early on, and like fake out Lopunny with dual priority. Just Toxic plus a lot of threats on his team just dealt with Kylie's team very, very well, and that's the reason why I have him in my top 10. Number 6, I have Luke. Luke has actually the highest differential in his division, and he's only number 6, so that just goes to show you that it's really hard to just rank these teams properly. Luke brought a really solid team. I really like the thought process behind the Necrozma set. He knew how much damage that it would do with the Psychic versus the Photon Geyser, and the fact that he needed to preserve PP versus Substitute Kyurem set. I really like the idea behind it. The Calm on Drampa was a huge threat. Everything on his team was just well thought out, and all the sets were just good. Tentacruel provided a great defensive support Pokemon, and with Scizor, it formed a great defensive core where he forced a lot of awkward plays from Sacred. Sacred went for a Hidden Power Fire with the Amoonguss on one turn, and just because of the fact that he had the Scizor, he wouldn't have clicked HG Fire if he didn't have the Scizor, and he didn't really use Scizor that much in the game. He used it to revenge the Aerodactyl, but the fact that he even had the scissor on the team forced him to make awkward plays. And that was basically the theme of the entire match. Sacred didn't really go for a lot of attacks in the game. Like, he clicked Thunderbolt turn 1, but he couldn't click it turn 2 because of the fear of the landers coming in. He clicked HV Fire with the Amoongus because he didn't want the Scizor to come in. He clicked a lot of awkward plays. He made a lot of awkward plays because of just the way that Luke built his team, and because of that, I feel like Luke's going to be very, very threatening later on in the season, just because of plays like that. If you played a really solid game, and he could be higher because, like I said, he does have a very good differential. He's 2-0, but I'd like to see him go against some of the top teams that I have in the power rankings to see how well he would really do. Number 5, I have Envy. Envy made good use of his Pokemon throughout the entire game. He played this game really, really well. And it just goes to show you how good Sceptile is. Sceptile is a tier 3 Pokemon, tier 3 Mega, but it put so much work in this game just because of its speed and decent coverage. Every time that it attacked, it dealt a decent amount of damage to everything on Tup's team, and he was able to whittle so many Pokemon. The Mismagius was whittled, the Klefki got whittled, even the Roserade, I think he got caught by HV Fire on the Switch or Dragon Pulse one time, and just every little bit of damage mattered on all the Pokemon the Sceptile weekend, and it really helped him in the late game because Tup needed to win the numbers game because he had a Scarf Rosary, which really put a lot of pressure on Envy's team. But because Envy had a Ditto, and because he had Sceptile, which are two very, very fast Pokemon that are ultimately going to win the end game if you just have sacks. If you can just sack Pokemon, go out into your Pokemon, throw another Pokemon, and if you win the numbers game and you have more sacks, then you're going to be able to win the game. And ultimately, Ditto was the MVP because it stopped Tup from being able to, just set up and win the game. It deterred the setup, and it made the end game go into Envy's favor. And yeah, very well played by Envy. Number 4. So this is where the reason why I have these people in the top 4 is because their opponents' win percentage. Every one of the people in the top 4, their opponents have at least one win, and the people in 5 through 10 either have one loss or their opponents have 0 wins so far. So I took into account their opponent's record and their own record when I was considering the top 4. So I have Galactic Elliot as number 4, and obviously, like I said, the strength of schedule did come into these power rankings. And so this game between Galactic and Jodar was pretty weird in my opinion. Basically, they played really recklessly earlier on in the game, where he tried to bluff the Hoopa Unbound being scarfed, and he wasn't able to kill the Infernape, and then the Infernape was able to 2-hit kill it back, and then they just used all of their offensive Pokemon earlier on in the game, and then it just came down to their defensive Pokemon, and they just couldn't do anything against each other. It kind of makes sense. I was considering why the Sigilyph wasn't just the stored power set, but there's a Hoopa Unbound that just walls it, so it makes sense. Ultimately, it was just a really weird game, but I feel like Galactic Elliot can adapt with his team so well as the season progresses, just because of the way that his team is drafted. He has Speed Pass in Scolipede, he has Porygon Z, which can go in so many different directions with Nasty Plot. It can go Agility, it can go Scarf, it can go Specs. It can even go Assault Vest if it wants to. There's so many options for Porygon Z. There's so many options for so many of his Pokemon. He hasn't brought Auroraville yet, and that is going to be incredibly threatening. I kind of initially when I saw his team, I kind of wish he had the Alola Sandslash, but now looking at it, he really does need that ground type Pokemon to be able to resist Rock because he has so many Rock weaknesses on his team. But I'm just going on his team, and I just feel like it's really awkward to talk about that last week because there were so many plays where both players just played so recklessly, where I can't say if it was a good or bad play. I don't want to be results oriented in the way that they played, because for the most part Jodar did win those 50-50 plays, but at the end of the day he wasn't able to win the match. So if you think results like overall, Galactic Elliot had the better game plan, I guess you could say, because he did win the game. But I don't think either Johto or Elliot thought that this game was going to go to a timer, with them just having their defensive Pokemon left. So I don't know. This game was very hard to just convey. So, anyways, I have Galactic Elliot number 4 because he is 2-0, and his opponents have wins. So number 3, I have Joey Pokemon. I think he had him at 3 last week as well. He played this game as good as you can. He really utilized his defensive Pokemon to frustrate Vivid. It's kind of like the way that I literally just talked Game Boy Luke. Game Boy Luke played with his team. Like he had Tentacruel and Scizor, 4 Stage Fires. Joey kind of did the same thing with Bronzong, Crocodile, and Toxapex, where he had 3 very good defensive Pokemon, and each one of those Pokemon are capable of taking a hit that the other does not want to take. And unfortunately for Joey, early on he did get crit by the Sharpedo on his Crocodile, which was very, very important to his team because it was such a sick set. But ultimately didn't really matter because he got a crucial Toxic on the Sharpedo before that even happened, and he was able to essentially KO the Sharpedo with the Toxic from Bronzong because he used Recover Stall with Toxapex to be able to beat it. And I guess he had so many ways to just prevent Vivid from being able to win the game, where like he just slowly but surely just used his pivots to just come back into the game. And there was one crucial turn where Joey had a Bronzong and he was kind of ready to sack it to just deal damage to the Nidoking, but I think he killed the Nidoking with the Bronzong, and that allowed the Comfey to essentially win the game. But Comfey didn't win the game because he won with Volcarona first. But if he didn't win with Volcarona, he was going to be able to win with Comfey just because of the fact that Nidoking was gone. And it was kind of unfortunate that, like I said earlier, the Crocodile did get crit, but that's the way the game goes. I kind of would have liked to see him go Toxapex first before the Crocodile, because I feel like he's not going to really expect the Toxapex, especially I don't think you would click Psychic Fang on a Bronzong first, and then I feel like the risk reward for going for Waterfall versus Crunch against a Bronzong isn't as bad as going for Psychic on a Bronzong, Psychic Fangs on a Bronzong into Toxapex. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I said that eloquently enough, but going for Waterfall on a Bronzong is not as devastating as going for a Psychic Fang on a Bronzong. I guess that's essentially what I was trying to say. Number 2, I have Wolf. I really like Wolf's strategy this week. He poisoned a lot of Nexus's team and used pivots for Nexus's offense. Like, I didn't mention this last week, but his use of Duosion was so good. There's a Mega Medicham on Nexus's team, and Duosion was essentially able to just hold it back because of Eviolite. And I really want to see how someone adapts to his Duosion using their fighting types, because in back-to-back weeks he was able to stop a Tracheon, and this week he was able to stop a Medicham. And like, the poison strategy that he used was very, very smart. He let his own team get poisoned. The Mandibuzz got poisoned, and there was that one point where Wolf was kind of upset that the rocks were going to stay up on the game, but I think he thought that I don't think he thought it through well enough, because Mandibuzz has recovery and Swampert doesn't have recovery. So if he could just roost, switch out, and bring it back in, he was going to be able to defog against the Swampert, especially if the Swampert was going to repeatedly go for Stealth Rock. But at the same time, he could catch onto that and switch out the Swampert to preserve it for later. But at that point, the Swampert it can't recover, but the Mandibuzz can. So essentially Wolf is going to be able to win that exchange anyway. And when everything got weakened, he was able to go into Virizion and Swordsness up and essentially just win the game. He did dodge a Heat Wave, but 1, it wasn't going to kill, and 2, even I don't even need to go into a reason for number 2. Like, the reason was going to sweep anyway. The only way that the Virizion was going to die was to HP flying, but he needed the Heat Wave to be able to deal damage to the Excadrill. He needed Heat Wave on the Zapdos, I mean, but unfortunately for Nexus, he didn't bring the Excadrill to really utilize the Heat Wave, and it also missed, so that's also very unfortunate. But even if he did connect with the Heat Wave, the only way that the Virizion was possibly dying was to a offensive Zapdos with Z Heat Wave or a HP flying. But yeah, Virizion just has fantastic special poke. It was going to be able to live, and there's no way that the Virizion was not sweeping his team after all that little bit of chip damage that Wolf was able to do earlier on in the game. And number 1, I have A-Drive. A-Drive versus Duncan was actually a lot closer than what you guys would think. There was a lot of 50-50s in this match where if A-Drive didn't win those 50-50s, Duncan had a very good chance of being able to win the game. So just turn 1, there was a 50-50 of Overheat versus Volt Switch with the Manectric. If he switched down to T-Tar on the Overheat, then the Manectric was going to get Pursuit trapped. It wouldn't have died to the Pursuit because he would have got off the Intimidate as he went for the Overheat, and he also just doesn't die naturally to Pursuit. T-Tar isn't that strong. And number 2, he could have gotten a Stealth Rock. If he Volt Switched on the Vikavolt, expecting the T-Tar to come in, then the Vikavolt actually has a very good matchup offensively versus Dan's team. I'm pretty sure that it had a grass move for the Gastrodon. If it was able to burn the Rindo Berry, that would have been very, very good for Duncan. And number 2, he also would have realized that it probably wasn't Assault Vest based on the damage that Vikavolt did. I don't know why Duncan thought that it was Assault Vest when he had the Bless Epsilon. Every damage calc that I just looked at, it just didn't make any sense for why the Gastrodon would have been Assault Vest in his eyes based on the damage that the Bless Epsilon did do to the Gastrodon. That was turn 1 was a 50-50. It changed the entire dynamic of the game if they both played turn 1 a little bit differently, which is actually insane, because usually turn 1s don't work out that way, but it did this time. And number 2, the Pissimian plays, they were kind of risky for Dan, but not 100% risky, because Dan knew that his Pissimian was banded, but Duncan didn't know that it was banded. So if Duncan tried to pivot around with his Pokemon, it would have worked out well for him, but he didn't know that he was able to do that. And he didn't know the risk that Dan was taking with his Pissimian when he was clicking his moves. He didn't know that his Pissimian was banded, so if he went for knockoff on the Hitmontop, he knew that it was banded then, but the Hitmontop was going to be 2-hit KO'd after that. And what I mean by that is that the next time that the Hitmontop does come in on the Pissimian, it's always going to die to 2 knockoffs because of the initial damage that it took from the first knockoff. And when you factor in Define and Banded, of course. But if you brought in the T-Tar on the knockoff, then, like I said before, the Pissimian gets Pursuit trapped. Obviously, Pissimian is a lot bulkier, it resists Pursuit, but with all the damage from Sand that it's going to be taking and everything else, then the Pissimian is going to be whittled down. And at that point, Pissimian might not even be that big of a threat, because he knows that it's not Scarfed. So he knows that a lot of his Pokemon will be able to outspeed it and be able to knock it out. And number 2, he could also, like I said, just set up Stealth Rock against it and not have to worry about Pursuit. With Stealth Rock up, Jirachi becomes a huge threat to Dan's team. But like I said, Dan played the game really well because he played knowing that Duncan did not know that it was banded, so he could afford to make plays like that earlier on in the game. And I also have to say that Duncan was just so caught up in thinking that the Zygarde could be able to sweep because he didn't bring the Shaman and he didn't bring the Skarmory, that he didn't realize that he couldn't really set up on anything. He didn't bring screens on any of his team. He didn't bring screens Rachi or screens Zatu. And if he did bring that, then maybe I can understand why he thought that Zygarde was going to be able to set up and sweep, because he was going to be able to set up a little bit easier. But the Zygarde, it couldn't sweep because there was Talonflame, which had priority. He had Intimidate on the Manectric, so that even if he did try to set up a little bit, it wasn't going to be able to get the KOs on the Florges because of the Intimidate, or the Gastron, or any of his other bulkier Pokemon, because Intimidate, like, it just nullifies it. He could just stack a couple Pokemon, bring it in, and just cycle in Intimidates and just not be able to lose to the Zygarde. Ultimately, like, Dan built a team really, really well because, like, his team is weak to Zygarde, but he has a Shaman, which would have been able to take on the Zygarde really well, but he decided to not bring the Shaman. But like the Shaman beats the Zygarde really, really well, but he didn't bring it, and even though his entire team is weak to Zygarde, like I say quote unquote weak to Zygarde, it still was able to handle it because he didn't allow it to set up. He didn't give him any setup opportunities. And ultimately he was just able to overwhelm Duncan with the strength of CB Pissimian and Life of Lycanroc, and he had pivots in case he did make the wrong move with his Pissimian. If you click knockoff on the T-Tar, he had Florges and he had Gastrodon and he had other Pokemon to be able to take on the T-Tar and pivot into it. Obviously Stealth Rock would be really, really bad for him, but it still wouldn't have been so devastating. If he went out to Blacephalon on close combat, then he could have went out to Gastrodon and Florges to be able to take on the Blacephalon. So Dan, excellent game plan, excellent execution. Lycanroc was actually super, super strong. I'm extremely terrified of that Pokemon. I don't think he had Accelerock on it either, which was very, very bold of him, considering he's playing against Blacephalon, but very solid plays. And games to watch going into next week. Wolf versus Duncan. Duncan coming off a big loss. Wolf on a 2-game winning streak, has very, very good differential. I think he's leading the league. Either him or Dan are leading the division, I mean the side. Luke versus Aaron. Aaron's coming off a win streak. Luke is 2-0, but his 2 wins are against teams that have 0 wins so far, so it's going to be a good indication of where these two match up. And Heated Mo versus Drew. Heated Mo is also 2-0, but his wins are, his strength of schedule isn't that strong, and then Drew is coming off a loss, so that'll be interesting to see if he bounces back or if Heated Mo is able to win. If Heated Mo wins this game, then I know he's for real, because this week I didn't have him in my top 10 because I feel like he made a lot of questionable plays, like the Memento on the Weavile, where he just had a lapse of judgment in his head. And there were plays like that throughout the game, and that I couldn't put him in my top 10 because he made plays like that. But if he's able to win against Drew, I can definitely put him in my top 10 comfortably. And then Patters versus Vivid. Patters, I think he's 1-1, but I feel like he's a much better battler than 1-1. Much better battler. Like either win or you lose. I'm sorry. But like this is just going to be a good indication of where I'm going to put these 2 players in the power rankings if one of them wins. So I'm rambling. Sorry. Hope you guys enjoyed. These are games to watch. Peace.